Okay, so today, due to lack of students, we're going to look at these questions together, and then later I will take attendance. So the first one, is it better to come up with a good solid lie than dish out vagueness? Let's take a look at the context for this one. Page 36. Oh, so that's the beginning of chapter 2. So in the story, the old lady has just died, and there's an ambulance and people know that something's going on. So the usual patrons are rattled and worrying us with questions. Yvonne has told us to be vague, but I detest vagueness. What's happening downstairs? A woman with gray brown hair cut in a severe bob, which means very clean and clear bob, leans across the desk to whisper, Fiona or Francine? She spends almost every weekday typing away on her laptop in the art history corner, but she rarely bothers to stop by the circ desk. I give her my best toothy smile. It's just an emergency drill. They have us perform these now and then. What would you do if someone slipped and fell in the downstairs bathroom? That sort of thing. I give her a wink as she straightens. So, like previously, she maybe was like kind of slouching or was kind of worried, but here her posture straightens up. Ah, she says with her fallen face and turns away. She'll learn the truth at some point, but what do I care? Better to come up with a good solid lie than dish out vagueness. This is for that troublesome heart of yours, I'd tell a patient who eyed my needle questioningly. This will help you sleep, I told another. Those weren't lies, come to think of it. Okay, so this last part, she's thinking back to her time as a nurse. When she's about to kill someone, she'd tell them a lie about how this needle will help you. And then come to think of it, yeah, it will help them sleep forever. That's why I was laughing. It's kind of funny. Um, and something else we can think about, her fallen face. Why does she look fallen or disappointed? Perhaps when she's asking Margot what happened, she's thinking maybe something exciting happened. But Margot's answer is very boring. So she feels disappointed. And then before we get to our main question, one more detail we can think about. Margot gives her my best toothy smile. So it's a smile showing her teeth. I think she's trying to reassure this woman, but if you were talking to your librarian and she gave you a full mouth, toothy smile, would you feel reassured or would you feel kind of creeped out? Personally, yeah, I think I would feel like it's a little bit creepy. Why are you smiling so big at me? I didn't really do anything to make you feel happy. I just asked you a question. Yeah, so it kind of feels like Margot is trying too hard to reassure someone. But this woman apparently does not notice that something is wrong. Okay, so the question is this, does this make sense? Is it better to come up with a good solid lie rather than be vague? So of course, one thing to think about is it okay to tell a lie? And I think most people would agree that in daily life, you should not lie. But in very certain circumstances, lying might be a better option. For example, if you are protecting your Jewish friend and the Nazis come knocking at your door, you probably don't want to answer their questions honestly. But there's a way of thinking that says that in modern life today, lying has become too easy an option to deal with annoying circumstances, to deal with small situations that you don't want to actually deal with, you can make them go away, at least for a while, by telling a small lie, like Margot does here. Right? As Margot admits, she'll learn the truth at some point. So sometime in the future, this woman might read the local news and read that someone died in the library bathroom, and she'll remember that scene and she'll realize Margot was not telling her the truth. So the truth will come out, but Margot says that's not her problem, right? She says, "What do I care?" So Margot in this scene is purely thinking about, first of all, herself, but secondly, keeping the library area calm. And the fastest way to keep people calm is to tell them nothing is going on. So there's a purpose, right? There's a goal. There is an end, we call this. The question is basically, do the ends justify the means? If your purpose is good or important enough, does that excuse your choice of a harmful or negative way to achieve that goal? And if you ask a philosopher, most philosophers, especially like moralists or ethicists, people who study ethics, will say no, the ends never justify the means. But in daily life, the way that we actually lead human lives, we often use that logic, right? This is so important. It's okay if I skip a few rules. Or this is such a good result. It's okay if I don't do everything exactly the right way. But every time we think this, there's a reason why one way is the right way and another way is not the right way. There are certain possible harms that can come about if you don't follow protocol, if you don't do things, we say, by the book, if you cut corners. And it may not hurt you this time, but it may hurt others, or it may hurt you another time. It's a gamble, it's a risk. So if we look at this one situation, then it does seem like there's no need to cause more trouble by telling people someone died in the restroom. But that's not what Yvonne is telling Margot to do. Yvonne doesn't say tell the whole truth. Yvonne says be vague. Vagueness, of course, means that the patrons will not be getting a satisfying answer. But it also means that the librarians will not have to lie. Instead of saying something did happen or something did not happen, they can say like, "Don't worry about it; it's being taken care of," or "It's just a small thing; it doesn't have to concern you." Or I guess small is also kind of lie. It's not really small when someone dies. But it has the benefit of the librarians aren't forced to lie. And so when later on this woman does discover what the truth is, they won't feel like the librarian lied to them. It will not be a breaking of trust. These patrons, they come in every week or every day. They interact with these librarians all the time. Even simply by frequency, they have built up a trust with the librarians. So if this woman goes home and realizes Margot not only told her a lie, but told her a lie and then smiled at her, it's quite a big break of trust. Especially like we don't really depend on librarians for life or death situations. So if a life or death situation does happen, and it turns out we can't trust our librarians, then how can we trust our librarians for even the small things? It's when a crisis happens that we think about who we can really trust. Uh, and so this moment is really not a good moment to break that trust. But as Margot says, what do I care? This attitude that she doesn't care is also probably part of her personality. It's not just because she feels annoyed in the moment. Because if she did care, she probably wouldn't have killed so many patients. She pretends like she cares about the people she kills, but she doesn't care about their family members. She doesn't care about the people, the doctors and nurses who try to save them and fail. Last week we asked you like her interaction with um, another patron. Does that constitute empathy? Can she really feel what other people feel? And it seems like no. It seems like she's just pretending. She's using her intellect to simulate empathy. So here, when she says, "What do I care?" she doesn't care what other people feel. That is closer to her real personality. And that also helps explain why she gives that big fat smile. Because she doesn't understand how that could make other people feel strange. There's also a psychological finding that people who tell a lie successfully often feel a sense of achievement. And one common expression of that sense of achievement is a smile. So this smile could also be the result of Margot planning out her lie, realizing it's a great lie to tell in this moment, and then deciding to tell the lie. It's a kind of successful preparation process. The German philosopher Immanuel Kant is the person who says things like the ends don't justify the means. You should never tell a lie, no matter what the circumstances. Um, if a moral rule applies to one person, then it applies to all people. These kinds of very strict moral ideas. And in our fast paced modern life, it can feel like it's a huge hassle to live your life like this. It takes much more time to explain things properly than it does to give a small white lie and to make the problem disappear. But over time, if you get into the habit of lying, you start to also get in the habit of leaving reality behind. When we tell a lie, we're not just saying something that's not true. We are creating a whole situation that is not true. A situation that has its own logic, its own characters, its own kind of psychology. When Margot says, "Oh, it's just an emergency drill," well, she's not just saying it's not a big deal. She's also saying the government asks libraries to do these drills, as she says, right? Uh, Now and then. So she's creating a reality where regular library patrons can expect that maybe once or twice a year there will be a kind of emergency drill situation, which of course is not true. So lying isn't just uh, covering up a problem; it's also creating an alternate reality that does not fit with what's actually the case. And over time, that could cause problems for yourself. If you're the kind of person who can often lie successfully, one way to do this, I shouldn't be teaching you how to lie successfully, but one way to do this is to, for a moment, believe your own lie. That's how you can beat a lie detector, for example. I really shouldn't tell you this, but like if you believe what you're saying, your body will not behave like it's a lie. But if you keep doing that, if you keep believing something that's not true, you might slowly lose your grasp on reality or on the importance of reality. Right. So, like, one example would be cult leaders who maybe start out telling lies and then later believe their own lies. But it doesn't have to be that big. If you're the kind of person who loses their grasp on the importance of reality, that means you don't really feel like the details are important. As long as, like, the main goal is the same, then the details don't really matter. How you achieve that goal doesn't really matter. And that can be a very dangerous thing to think because the details do matter. We even have an idiom for this, right? The devil is in the details. If you do it the wrong way, there might be problems that you have not prepared for, or you might even cause new problems. The best definition of evil that I have read is you only care about the ends, not the means. You only care about your goal, not about how you achieve that goal. Millions could die and it wouldn't matter as long as you achieve your goal. To me, that sounds like pure evil. So, the fact that in this story, Margot, our serial killer protagonist, tells a lie so easily and, in fact, kind of feels achievement and pleasure in doing this is a red flag. It's a big sign that her personality is not a positive uh, role model personality. Okay, do you have other thoughts about question one? Oh, there's a second section, right? Lying to deal with irrational people. Here, we can see a better example of why lying could be harmful, even if it works. So here we have a patron named Martin who has like a paranoid fear that he'll do something and the computer that he's using will get a virus and he'll never be able to save the computer or use it again. It'll cause lots of damage, whatever. Paranoid. And he keeps on asking Patricia, is it okay if I do this? Is it okay if I do that? And Patricia can't handle it anymore, right? Uh, when a minute has passed, Martin pops back up, repeats his complaint, and beckons Patricia. She looks seasick, wobbly, and pale, like she's about to faint or something. Uh, she sits down after this third time with Martin and blots her eyes. So she like takes a tissue to soak up the tears around her eyes. Blows her nose, stares blearily around like a soldier weary from defeat but still facing her foe. And then Martin stands up again. So here's how Margot deals with this. Before Patricia can rise, I'm over there, tapping him on the shoulder, and he's turning to me, his dry lips parting to tell me his tale. I put up a finger to shush him, lean close, and say low in his ear. So she knows she's not supposed to do this. That's why she's whispering it to him. Now, Martin, that woman controls the virus that wants to infect you. If you stay away from her, you'll be safe. She wants you to keep asking for help. Look at her. We both look over at Patricia's startled, wary face. It could be mistaken for an angry face, I suppose, or even an evil one. I see Martin flinch as if he's seeing the devil. If you sit here and carry on, it won't get you, okay? But if you go over there again, even once more, she'll plant the virus in your email and we will never be able to get it out. If Liz, another coworker, could hear this, she'd scold me. But look at him. He's no longer terrorized. His eyes, once popping out of his head, are droopy with sleep now. He nods and sinks down into his chair, arms hanging loose at his sides. So yes, Margot's lie does solve the situation for Patricia and for herself. But look at what it does to Martin. His eyes are droopy with sleep. He nods and sinks down into his chair, arms hanging loose. How do you think he feels? First of all, scared, right? But not the same kind of scared as before. Before he was already scared that he would do something to the computer would do something to him. Now he still feels scared, but there's no more resistance. There's no effort to fight back or to solve the problem. He feels resigned, 认命, as if This evil is too great for anyone to handle. He just has to take whatever comes, and there's nothing he can do about it. In other words, he is a conspiracy theorist who has his conspiracy proven correct. Imagine how that could lead to more harm either for him or for other people in his life. He'll go around thinking, he was right. There are people infecting my computer trying to kill me. He'll go around talking about this to his friends or his neighbors, his community members. Maybe he might even connect with other conspiracy theorists, and it would lead to a more dangerous kind of political movement. We don't know. What we do know is that this one small positive result has already caused great mental harm to Martin himself. So the question here, is it okay to lie to deal with irrational people? It looks okay in the short term, but if you have the time and energy, you still should try to deal with them honestly. In this case, they're in the library. There's no emergency. Margot has lots of time and physical energy to deal with him. She just doesn't want to spend the mental energy to deal with him. Okay, other thoughts or questions about number one? All right, number two. Why do you think her interview with the detective feels suspicious? Does he suspect her? Are these the same question? Well, we can already answer the last part. Uh, no. I wrote these in order. Let's take these in order. Okay, so 39. So someone died in the library. Of course, the police are going to send somebody here. What's really interesting is look at how he's introduced. This is the middle of rural Ohio. It's a mostly white neighborhood. Or community, I should say. A handsome black man wearing a dark gray suit walks through our door the next day. He removes his hat and tips his head back to take in our high arched ceilings as if he stepped into a church. I like him for that and the way he looks around approvingly. But when his eyes land on mine, the clamping in my gut says, detective. So Margot has an instinctual feeling that this is a cop. I just feel like it's a really great thing to have from like her serial killer days. She might have left everything behind her, but she can still tell when someone is a cop. So yes, and then of course he does walk over and introduce himself. In this scene, everyone else is gone. Patricia and I are the only two staff members, and she is absorbed in her work. So Margot has to face this cop by herself. Detective Parsons, CPD, she says. PD usually stands for Police Department, and the name of their town is Carlisle, so CPD. And he is a police detective. And then he starts asking questions, right? Their town is Carlisle. Uh, General questions about what happened. Has it happened before? What's your name? And then when Margot says, if you'd like to speak to our director, I can try to find her for you, I say, glancing around for Yvonne. He assures me it's all right, that he's happy to speak with me. But what I hear beneath the words is, I came here to speak to you. And now that Margot understands him and he has finished with the introductory questions, we grin at each other like fools. So there's no more vagueness or uncertainty about what's happening here. She knows why he's talking to her. He now knows that she knows why he's talking to her. They don't have to pretend anymore. Beyond the detective's head, I see Patricia look up. Yeah, the detective is shorter than Margot. I pull my shoulders back and straighten to my full height so that when he reaches the desk, I'm staring down at him, down at his shiny bald spot, down at his deep brown eyes lifted to mine. So Margot is taller. So beyond the detective's head, I see Patricia look up. She can't hear what we're saying, but she's clocked the tension. She has noticed the tension, recognized that he isn't just a regular patron. I'm sure of it. So Margot doesn't know, but this is her best guess. This is why Patricia is looking up. Okay, and then here start the real questions. So, I was told that Ms. Mather got into quite an altercation here not long before her death. Altercation means a conflict. Uh, and then Margot says Ms. Mather was always getting into altercations, but we all loved her. We'll miss her. And the detective grabs onto that. When Margot says we'll miss her, he says, "Will you?" Sounds like she was a pain in the ass. He gives a low laugh. He's my confidant, my friend. Well, she certainly was. But we treat all of our patients with respect, I say, a little crispy. And then he says, "Excuse me," and she realizes, wait, I said patients. I meant patrons. Oh no. And then she tries to cover it up by saying, sometimes it's hard not to think of them as patients, poor souls. But of course, this does not work. The detective looks down in discomfort. So, like, already for this first question, the detective is quite smart in getting information out of Margot. Look, Margot describes Judy Mathers as often causing trouble. The detective says she sounds like she was a pain in the ass, and Margot agrees, says she certainly was. The woman just died, and you're comfortable saying she was a pain in the ass? Not a normal response. And then, of course, she says patients instead of patrons. Uh, and the detective, you look, at this moment, the detective is trying to gather information, maybe see if Margot could be a suspect. So he needs the conversation to keep going. That's why he offered this bait. And Margot falls for it. She says that he's my confidant, my friend. That's exactly what the cop wants her to think. Because if she thinks this, she might be more willing to give up more information to this friend. But the cop needs the conversation to continue to gather more information. If he points out that Margot said patients instead of patrons, something weird is happening here, he's afraid that Margot will now shut up and stop talking to him. So he can't really grab onto that. He can only wait in discomfort uh, and try to keep the conversation going. So the next thing he says, a very direct question: did you have an altercation with Ms. Mather before she died? And were you also the person who found the body? And then Margot decides to answer the second question first. Do you think that's kind of suspicious? Question one, did you have a fight with her before she died? Question two, did you find her body? And then Margot chooses to jump to number two. Seems a little bit suspicious, right? If Margot did not have a fight with Judy, she could have just said, no, we didn't have a fight. So not answering the first one means that there's more information about that item, which means it's not a no, it's something happened. It's avoiding the question that makes Margot feel a little suspicious. And so after talking about who found the body, how Margot behaved toward the body. The detective comes back and asks again, did you fight or argue with her? And Margot, of course, has to say she did. There were witnesses, people know. But then she again tries to cover this up, but our disagreements were regular as rain. Now, again, I don't know whether that is helping Margot or hurting Margot. When the cop says, did you get into a fight with this woman who died? And you say, yes, but we fought all the time. I don't think that helps her. Yeah, so on the one hand, it feels like you can tell Margot's trying to make it sound like not a big deal, but you can also tell that Margot does not have a good understanding of human relationships because everyone else who hear this will think, oh, these two did not have a good relationship if they fought all the time. So again, her lack of like empathy also hurts her ability to protect herself. Uh, and the cop tries another tactic. He says, I'm just following up on the incident. So he's trying to reassure Margot. He's not trying to find a suspect. He just wants to make sure he gets all the facts. But of course, we know that the reason a cop needs all the facts is to see if there is a possible suspect. And I think Margot knows this too, because she interrupts him. He says, there were some questions about what went on down there, and Margot interrupts him. She died, I say. And he stares at me. I sounded too shrill, I know, too excited. Another very strange thing for her to do. Why would she interrupt him to say that she died? If we keep reading, we start to understand what she's thinking. She was old and she died, I say more softly. I don't really understand all this fuss. Like, I guess this does make a kind of logical sense that older people are more likely to die. But like when it happens, it's still a big thing. Any death is a big thing unless you are used to death, unless you have caused multiple deaths, and so death is no longer a big thing for you. Right. So for Margot, who was not only a nurse but a killer nurse, death really is not a big thing. So she, I guess, at this moment, she has forgotten what a big deal death is for most other people. So like this response is kind of strange. Again, the cop needs the conversation to keep going, see if he can gather more information. So he says, "It looks like a natural death, Miss Finch. We're just being thorough. I'm sure you can appreciate that on behalf of one of your patrons." I can't tell for sure if he's leaned on the word patrons or if I've imagined it, whether he has emphasized this word or if that's just Margot's imagination. And then finally, Margot tries to cover up everything by saying, it's the troublesome ones you miss, you know, detective? At least that's the way I feel. So again, like, this could make sense if you think about this logically. Let me give you an example. Who do you think a teacher like myself will notice more? A student who does above average work, listens quietly in class, and never causes problems? Or a student who always comes in late, creates problems, disturbs the class? Usually the second one, right? It's the troublesome ones you miss. Miss, not as in like want to come back, but miss as in feel the loss. It's more obvious, it's more apparent that this person is not here. It's less about is it good or bad, it's more about how deep is the impression. Miss means notice that they're not here. Could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. Uh, but of course, for most people, they don't think about it this way. They think about miss as in want them to come back. So this sentence can also be seen as kind of suspicious. And Margot kind of knows this. Detective Parsons' face goes soft with what looks like genuine sympathy. Even so, I don't trust it. So, yes, it's natural for Margot not to trust the police. But for us readers, this is a funny sentence because we also don't think the cop is truly sympathetic. We think the cop thinks that Margot killed her. So he's performing sympathy to try to get her not to be scared of the police. So, in fact, we agree with Margot about this sentence, but we agree for different reasons. For Margot, the serial killer, the police are never to be trusted. But for us, it's Margot who can't be trusted, and that's why the detective doesn't trust her. Okay, so that's basically what happens, but there's one more detail I want to add. The way that this scene is presented to us is through Margot's perspective, right? She sees the cop, she has thoughts about never trusting the police, and so whatever she says, she always tries to make it sound less suspicious, often failing, but she tries. After the cop leaves and her coworkers come back, uh, they ask her about the cop's visit, like what did he say, what did you say, that kind of thing. So she gives a summary, right? Oh, nothing, just some normal questions about the thing, about Julia, how we all felt about her, and so on. I told him we felt she was a pain in the ass. And from the other people's reactions, we realized, wait, they're right. This is not a normal thing to say. I start to laugh at this phrase I've borrowed from Detective Parson, right? She's not the one who uses this. It's the detective who uses this first. Sounds like she was a pain in the ass, he says. So she borrows this from the cop, but Nazreen gasps. Yvonne squints as if I've pinched her. I hope you didn't say exactly that, Margot. I catch myself, recalibrate. No, no, not exactly. Of course not. I said we'd miss her, poor soul. So for the reader, it's only when we get to this point that it is confirmed. Calling a recently dead woman a pain in the ass is not normal. But the earlier scene, because we were so deep in Margot's perspective, if we're reading too fast, we may not have noticed that it's not a normal response. Okay, so yeah, yes, because here we get reactions from people who are not sharing Margot's perspective. So like this is a fun thing to do with like your protagonist. Make them, we call them an unreliable narrator, someone who tells you the story, but you can't really trust what they say. And it's these moments that remind us that Margot is in fact unreliable. She thinks about her own life one way, and everyone else thinks about her life a completely different way. But we're stuck in her perspective. We talked about this last week, right? Between Margot and Patricia, how they see each other, how they see the other characters. So the question was, does it feel suspicious? Hell yes. Do you think he suspects her? Hell yes. Right? All of the uncomfortable reactions that he had, the way that he kind of baits her, to draws her in to give a strange response, to see if she's willing to give a strange response. So yeah, he does suspect her. Also, he came to talk with her, not with anyone else. So maybe he already walked in suspecting her from the beginning. But are these two the same questions? Maybe not. If Margot's behavior seems suspicious, that seems like a good reason for the cop to make her a suspect. But that's assuming that people have a kind of standard or normal reaction when someone dies. And that's not true. Death is one of the few things in modern life that we don't really plan for, that we don't really think about, often until it's too late. Sometimes you'll see like the government uh, sending out reminders to old people, hey, remember to plan for after you leave this world. Because most people don't think about that. And if you don't think about something and then it happens, how will you react? You don't know. You haven't planned for it. You haven't thought about it. So, in fact, the way that people react to death is very idiosyncratic. It's different for every person. And the reactions you see on TV, on the news, in the movies are not always the real reactions that people have. The saying here is everyone grieves in their own way. 每个人都有自己哀悼的方式. So the fact that Margot's behavior is suspicious does not mean she is more likely to have killed someone. If we take these in the other direction, if the cop suspects her, is it because she feels suspicious? Maybe. Like it would make sense if both sides said yes. But there could be other reasons why a cop suspects Margot. The most obvious one is because Margot is the person who stayed with Julia as she died. She's the last person to see Julia alive. She was alone in that bathroom stall. So if the cops need a suspect, Margot would be the easiest person to turn into a suspect. So it's kind of clear that the cop walks into the room already suspecting Margot to a certain degree. When he's looking for information, he's looking for more evidence against her, but he's also seeing if there are reasons that prove Margot did not kill her. And he does not find any such information. We call this information an alibi. Alibi is usually translated as 不在场证明, but really it's any proof that someone did not commit the crime. So, in fact, these two are not the same questions because once again, the cops are playing a different game. They're not trying to figure out the truth. They're trying to figure out if there's someone they should lock up. Okay, any thoughts or questions about number two? It does seem like the cop suspects Margot. He comes in specifically to talk to her. And then when Margot does strange things, he doesn't make a comment. He just kind of waits for the moment to pass. So now you're asking the same question Margot asks herself. Unless he knows, unless he has the whole truth on the tip of his tongue. Miss Finch, you're that killer nurse Jane Rivers, aren't you? I think at this point, probably not. I think this is just Margot being paranoid. But that might change in the future, right? Someone has died. The cop has an investigation. He's going to keep looking and asking questions until he gets all the information that he wants. It could be that, okay, think about this. It's a small town. I guess not a lot of people die here compared to like a big city. So for this town, this is a big case. And just because it's a small town does not mean that the cop is worse at his job. All cops have to go through basic training. You have to pass a number of tests to become a detective. He knows basic criminal psychology. He knows if someone is behaving in a strange way or not. So, in a small town with not a lot of other business, this cop is more likely to spend more time on this case, to think more deeply about Margot's reactions. Maybe he might feel like something strange is going on. He needs to look around more. And yes, so maybe he might discover the truth. At least that's what Margot is afraid of. Other thoughts or questions? All right, let's take a short break. Question 3. Can reading be dangerous? As we know, Margot is not a reader. She doesn't read in her personal life. But here she does. Let's see. Yeah, so on page 45, it says Patricia suddenly disappears. Margot goes looking for her. She finds her in the book stacks, holding a book, smiling as if sweetly reminiscing, remembering good times. Uh, and so Margot is now curious. What book is she holding? The author's name, Jackson. The title, We Have Always Lived in the Castle. This is a real book. The author is Shirley Jackson, who is a very famous author in American literature. So, of course, now Margot is curious about the book. So she takes the book, the novel by Shirley Jackson, describes the cover. Okay, let's look at the cover. The cover shows a slim, forbidding woman in a checkered dress, which means there's like squares, goods, against the background of a pink and blue sky. She stands behind a locked gate with vines climbing up its bars, her face partly shadowed. A handwritten sign on the gate reads, "No trespassing, private." I like it. It gives me a cool shiver, something I didn't know books could do. So, Margot's first encounter with this book, even just looking at the picture on the front, gives her a physical reaction. And she didn't know that a book could do this. So, how might a book be dangerous? We're starting to get some idea. Of course, I haven't opened it and I don't intend to. Ha ha ha. That's what you think. She finally gets through the day. She looks at the book. So, this woman has a secret. I turn it over to read the back, and then we have a description of the book. I'm going to read this to you because this book is very well. I don't want to say that the author chose a good book. It seems like the author designed her story in relation to the story of this book. So I'm going to read it to you. Maricat Blackwood lives on the family estate with her sister Constance and Uncle Julian. Once there were 7 Blackwoods until a fatal dose of arsenic, uh, sun, I think, 毒药, it's a poison, huh? Hishuang, thank you, found its way into the sugar bowl one terrible night. Found its way, just happened to be there. Acquitted of the murders, which means a jury found her not guilty. Constance returned to the big old house where Maricat protects her from the curiosity and hostility of the villagers. Their days pass in happy isolation until cousin Charles appears. Only Maricat can see the danger, and she must act swiftly to keep Constance from his grasp. I think from this description, we can all agree that Constance killed everybody, right? She's the one who added the arsenic to the sugar bowl. Okay, while I was reading the description, my pulse sped up. 心跳加速. I didn't know a book could do that either. So, why do you think Margot felt excited by this book, the description of the book's events? Yeah, maybe she sees herself in the main character, especially because we know that Margot's first crime was when she was a young girl. She burned down her house. You guys remember this? Okay, I can't use the search function because it's going to start from the very beginning. You know what? I think it's worth it. Skip to build a fire. What page is this? Nope, no, too early. Keep going. Nope, nope. Oh, gosh, it's not fire. Maybe it's burned. Burned down? Oh, I know, I know. Smoke. Smoke is the one. Okay, now we have to get through people smoking cigarettes. Okay, here, page 39. I think this is this week. Yeah, so she meets the detective, right? Detective Parson. This reminds her of her first encounter with the cops. So my gut says detective. He smiles in a way that's meant to be disarming, to make you careless. But detectives always smile. They're taught to charm and also to lie through their straight white teeth. This is true. In the United States, the cops are allowed to lie to you. The thinking is if you're not guilty, you would never admit that you're guilty, even if someone lies to you. But of course, the real truth is that because of psychological reasons, a lot of people admit to doing things that they did not do simply to end the high pressure interrogation and the anxiety of being a suspect. So, psychologically speaking, we should not allow the police to lie. But they do, and they can in the US, and they do. So, and then here she starts entering the memory. You're still a child, but they offer you coffee and then soda, which you accept. And as you sip the fizzy drink, they ask, did you wake up and smell smoke? Or were you already awake? You can tell me, honey. If you were asleep, how did you get out so fast? Did you check your mom and stepdad's room before you ran out? So I think from this series of questions and Margot's negative attitude toward these questions, we can all agree that Margot killed her parents. Yeah. Like, yeah, where did this come from, right? It's such a specific example. It must be, yeah, she's thinking like it's a hypothetical, but it's so specific, it must be a memory. And this memory will also come back later in the book as well. Yeah, so Margot does not trust the cops, and her first crime had to do with fire and killing her family members. So yes, perhaps the synopsis of the book reminds her of herself, right? Killing family members, getting away with it, a big old house, and then now someone new appears threatening to expose the truth. Gosh, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Yeah, so that's probably why Margot feels excited reading this. It also might explain her reaction when she starts reading. I flip the book over, open to the first page, and start to read. My name is Mary Catherine Blackwood. I am 18 years old, and I live with my sister Constance. I like her right away. There is nothing in these first lines to help you decide whether you like this person or not. The only reason Margot likes her right away is because she already liked her, because she knows what she did, and therefore likes her because she likes herself. But then this happens. I go shopping with Merricat in town. I bristle over the villagers' cruelty and coldness. She starts putting her own self into the story. She identifies with the protagonist. She's no longer just examining or observing. She is inside, emotionally inside the story. When I look up 50 or so pages in, it's past 9 o'clock. So this also tells us Margot is a slow reader. Like, how long would it take you to read 50 pages of Chinese novel? It wouldn't take you 3 hours, right? Yes. Well, I mean, of course, but like if you open most novels, they're not like they're not like our textbooks, so many words. Um, it takes an effort for me to close the book and set it aside. So this person who says she doesn't read now can't stop reading. And then she goes to bed under the covers to turn out the light. In a dream, I lie on soft grass, blinking up at a circle of hostile faces. They're vaguely familiar. Almost Donna, almost Liz, almost one of my old patients. All their mouths are moving, but I can't hear what they're saying, and I can't respond. I can only lie there, flinching under the weight of their scorn. So apparently they're acting negatively toward Margot. I wake with a headache, wondering if reading is more dangerous than I thought. Okay, dream sequence. You love them or you hate them. Everybody has different kinds of dreams. Some uh, kinds are more common than others, but everyone's dream is slightly different. So that poses a problem for the writer or indeed the filmmaker who wants to present a dream sequence. Should they present a dream as they themselves experience it or could experience it? On one hand, that would be more accurate, but on the other hand, maybe the way that they dream might be different from the way that the reader or the audience dreams. And so the effect would not work. The other option is to forget about the realism of dreams, just create a kind of weird situation that expresses a certain meaning that you want it to have. That seems to be what's happening here. The point is not, is this a realistic dream? The point is, why have this dream? What is meaningful about this image? And it seems like the emphasis is on here, scorn. Margot knows that they are blaming her. Donna, she knows, disagrees with her reasons for killing people. Liz, she does not have a good relationship with. This is her library coworker. But what about her old patients? According to Margot herself, isn't she helping her patients? Isn't she relieving them from the burden of being alive or something like that? Apparently, Margot herself knows that this is just a rationalization, 合理化. It's not the truth. Emotionally, deep in her mind, she knows that she's not killing them to help them. That's why in this dream, her patient also has a negative attitude toward her. Yeah, yeah. So like Margot herself, what some part of her does know it's not right to kill people, but she gets some kind of bigger benefit from doing that. Um, we had a hint of what that benefit could be when she observed Julie's death. But later on, we will see some flashbacks about when she used to kill people, and we start to understand what she really gets from killing people. Another important thing about this dream is all their mouths are moving, but I can't hear what they're saying and I can't respond. Compare this to her conversation with the cop. The cop is saying things to her, she can respond, and when she is responding, she tries to manipulate the conversation. So the point here is that she can't respond to what they're saying. She has no control over what they are saying to her, about her. There's no way for her to protect herself in this dream. And then finally, for us readers, there's one last important point. Margot can't hear what they're saying. We already know Margot lacks real empathy. So when she observes people, she doesn't observe what do they feel like, what do they want. She observes what are they doing? Will it help me or will it hurt me? She doesn't really hear, she doesn't really see, understand what other people are thinking and feeling. So the dream says, I can't hear what they're saying. So, all in all, regardless of whether the dream is realistic or not, it's a pretty well written dream sequence. It gets across some important ideas to the reader. Okay, so up to this point, we see the book having a big effect on Margot. Later, we see that all day she can't concentrate. She can't wait to go home and finish the book. And then when she goes home and she keeps, this keeps happening throughout the week. I move through Friday in a daze, right? She's always waiting for my book and my friends, Constance Maricat, who sets fire to their house in an effort to chase out cousin Charles. Wow, the similarities continue to build. So yeah, all week Margot can't concentrate, and then uh, finally on Sunday afternoon, I turn the last page, read the final lines. Oh, Constance, Maricat says, we're so happy, but I am not. The little monster doesn't care about that. This is also a very strange sentence. She's blaming Maricat for not caring that Margot is not happy. She's blaming a fictional character for not caring about her. You can see how deeply she's engrossed in this story, how perhaps for someone who already does not have a strong relationship with reality, how reading a book might draw her even further away from reality. I am left sitting here, a dummy with a shut book. That's it. The bubble I've been living in is popped, kaput, after a mere handful of days. I'm not one of the marvelous Blackwood sisters. I'm a villager, a stranger, pawing at the gate. Pawing here is like describing like a dog scratching a door. Maricat calls them poor strangers in that pitying, despising, laughing tone of hers. Oh, Constance, we're so happy. What about the rest of us? I pick up the book and hurl it against the living room wall. It flops to the floor. So I think we can start to talk about this question. Can reading be dangerous? Yes. If you are the kind of person who has what we call an addictive personality, once you start something, it's hard for you to stop. In that case, yes, a book can be dangerous because we all have responsibilities and tasks that we have to do every day. But if you can't stop reading, that might cause problems in your daily life. It's even more dangerous for someone like Margot, who does not have a strong grasp on reality. When she's able to live in delusions and lies of her own making, then she might lose herself in a fictional story as well. She might find her identity so caught up in the story that when the story ends, or even just when she has to put down the book, it feels like she has lost part of herself. You know, the question about the danger of reading is an ancient question. Today, we all think like, oh, reading is great. Everybody should read more. And that's true. Everyone should read more. But reading can also be dangerous. Plato, 柏拉图, in his Republic, 共和国, famously said that he would chase out all the poets because the poets use emotion and fiction to make you do or think things instead of using logic and reason. In the 19th century, the British, the 18th and 19th centuries, the British often warned people about reading things that are too sentimental, too emotional. They thought that if you excite yourself too much with reading these things, it is bad for your mind and also bad for your body. And modern psychology kind of proves their point. You know, when we think about something, when we think about doing something, and when we actually do the thing, our brains have the same process. The thinking process goes through the same process in our mirror neurons, 镜像神经元, I think that's what it's called. So when you think about a real person and you examine like how do they feel, how do they think, what's my relationship with them, our brain does the same thing as when you think about a fictional person in the same way. Our brain doesn't care whether it's real or not. Our brain only cares about your actions and relationships. So yes, uh, some people like reading sad books. It helps them to let them cry, to vent emotion, to deal with stress, so that they're not crying about real things, they're crying about fictional things. There is, in fact, a link between what you read and what you think and feel. Just because it's not real doesn't mean it can't hurt you. So yes, reading can be dangerous. I think there was a quote from Harry Potter I can use here, but I can't remember the quote. Yeah. In book 7, Harry dies, right? He enters that train station. Okay, if you haven't read Harry Potter, I'm not going to spoil it to you. Um, any more thoughts or questions about number 3? In fact, reading can be dangerous. What about reading this book? We're reading a story from the perspective of a serial killer. Could that be dangerous? It could, right? Yeah, like we just examined the scene between Margot and the cop, and I pointed out all the weird stuff that she does. But if I didn't point them out to you, would you think that they were weird? Or would you think, oh, maybe this is something that people do and people say? Reading a book with an unreliable narrator, especially a morally unreliable narrator, we might call this an anti-hero. Sorry to Taylor Swift. Assumes that you can tell which parts are like proper and which parts are strange. But not everyone can tell the difference. We learn from everything we read and observe, whether it is right or not. So yes, reading this book can also be a bit dangerous. Hopefully, though, like our discussions can offer a guide as to like which parts to trust and which parts not to trust. And also, like Margot's a serial killer. You should never trust serial killers. I think that should be obvious. Okay, other thoughts or questions about number 3? No? Okay, number 4. Have you ever felt like Margot does while and after she reads this book? And why do you think this happens? I think I just answered that question. But it applies not just to books, right? It applies to movies as well. If you cry when you watch a movie, that's why. Interestingly, animated movies don't always work like this. Some people, when they watch an animation, they don't really feel like these are real characters or real people. They don't really have that emotional response, regardless of the animation style. But for most kinds of fiction, whether it's a story, a book, a radio show, a song, or a movie or TV show, our brains react in similar ways. Yeah, so question 4 would have been a really cool question for group discussion, right? You can talk about your own reading experiences, think about why a certain work affects you more than others. Yeah, but you can think about this for yourself as well. Question 5. We also kind of talked about this last week. Last week was about Patricia's relationship with Margot. This week, we're reversing it, Margot's relationship with Patricia. So last week, we were like We were saying about how Patricia is from the big city, and she doesn't want to be here, but she notices that Margot seems different from everyone else. She seems to have an energy. She's bigger than life. She is able to deal with the patrons' various problems. So Patricia becomes curious about her, starts writing descriptions of her, etc. This week, what do we see from Margot's point of view? When so when the cop comes, Patricia is there, and Margot notices that Patricia is there. She even, this is kind of a joke from the author, uh, but she even thinks, what if Patricia is writing everything down? Where is it? Okay, so I catch Patricia looking my way, her gaze full of questions. Who was he? What did he say? But she doesn't come over to ask. So Margot notices Patricia observing her. And then this is something that Margot notices. She walks over to Patricia. Patricia looks up, quiet and still, with her pen in one hand, her other hand covering the open page of her notebook. Look, imagine that you're listening to me talk and you have an open notebook and you're taking notes. And like a friend comes over to say hi. Would your hand end up on top of your notebook? Like you're writing, right? And someone says hi, and you look up and say hi. Would your hand end up on the paper? Probably not, right? Your hand was not originally on the paper. Why would your hand move to the paper just because somebody is saying hi? So this is intentional. Patricia is intentionally covering the open page. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can practice with your friend. Right? Pretend like you're taking notes. When they come over, you say hi and notice where your hands are. They will not be on the page. So Margot is already starting to notice something strange. They go out for coffee, they chat a bit, and then Patricia gets down to why she has invited Margot to coffee. Patricia says, what were you doing down there? Why were you with her? It takes me a moment to understand, to realize what she's really asking. Why were you on top of her? It seemed like you were trying to help her, Patricia says, before I can think how to answer, her dark eyes holding mine. Yes, I say, overwhelmed by her understanding, her insight. I lean close to her over the table and tell her, I used to help people all the time. I used to be a nurse. Yeah. Yeah, well, same reason that she caved to the police officer. She feels like Patricia understands her, right? The cop felt like a friend, a confidant. Same thing. So last week we talked about how Margot, her relationship with Donna shows that she also wants to be understood by other people. So, like, she needs to keep her own secrets, but also she hopes that someone can understand her. So here she is quite surprised when she thinks that Patricia might understand her. And then in the bath, this is page 44, I recall how Patricia searched my face and squinted a bit when I blurted out that I'd been a nurse. I wonder what my own face looked like, shocked, afraid. Right afterward, her prying questions began. But how were you a nurse? When did you train as a nurse? blah, blah, blah. But now my wariness rose like a wall. Finally, she feels maybe I said too much. Patricia nodded, looking thoughtful. I could tell she was formulating more difficult, delicate questions like, why exactly did you quit? And why make such a dramatic exit? So Margot starts feeling like maybe Patricia is asking a bit too much. The next day at work, she sees Patricia again writing in her notebook, and she says she keeps to herself, except for that notebook. Maybe she spills it all in there, what I was, what I did in the bathroom. So, and then, well, fine, notebooks can't talk, they can't spread malicious gossip and get you fired. So Margot actually does guess correctly what Patricia is kind of sort of doing when she's writing. But like, I don't know about you, but if I were a criminal and I realized somebody was writing down my details, I would feel even more danger than if they were simply talking about it in using gossip. Because like you gossip with somebody and then it's gone, it's stays in people's memories, but you don't have evidence. Whereas if you write it down, that's evidence. The famous line from the TV show Succession: "Are you taking notes on a fucking criminal conspiracy?" If it's criminal, you shouldn't be taking notes. Why do I keep giving you criminal advice? Okay, so Margot's relationship with Patricia, she hopes that Patricia can understand her, but she's also curious about like what kind of person Patricia is, her interests, and then finally she's afraid that Patricia might know too much about her. Again, contradictory desires, but people are contradictory. Okay, do you have questions about today? If not, for next week, please read up to the end of chapter 2. Yes. And if you're not sure where that is, the PowerPoint has page numbers. So next week is from 51 to the end of chapter 2. That's what I just said. Okay, yeah. Okay, let's take attendance.